Hi, everyone. Welcome to We Didn't Turn Out Okay. Today, I'm with Robyn Youkilis. And Robyn, I didn't know, has written 2 books. And she's a wellness expert for 16 years now. And she's the founder of Your Healthiest You, which is your coaching practice. Can you tell us quickly what your books were about?
Yeah. So I got into wellness a very long time ago before there were, Whole Foods everywhere and everyone knew what red light therapy was. Not that everybody knows, but we see it a lot on social media. It's been a while. So I started with coaching 101 and then moving into group programs. And then I started to see themes coming together with my clients. And eventually that's what made it into the books. And the books are really about the intersection between gut health and gut intuition and how they're connected. And so I believe when you clean up your gut, focus on quality foods, breathing, meditation, water, you can hear messages more. You can hear your intuition even more clearly. And that really relates to motherhood as well so much, right? So
yes,
really at the root.
I want to get into that a little bit. It was definitely new to me. I remember going through IVF and was talking with my psychiatrist and she recommended magnesium. And I was like, why? What? Okay. She's like, it will help you be regular. I'm like, why does that matter? She's like, it's good for mood and all these other things.
She knew.
And anyone who has asked me, what's a quote that resonates with you? I say it's my mom growing up saying, go with your gut. And so I feel like
oh my God.
It's why I wanted to ask you more about your books. And I think we can get into that later, how we help our kids, listen to their bodies and have intuition that
and understand what it is. Really, what is this superpower that we all have? And we have to come back to it so much for ourselves and in any path we choose in life. So it's really everything.
And especially motherhood, I think it resonates more than ever. And then you're also a mom to 2 girls. Navy, who's 9 or almost 9.
She's almost 9. She's been saying she's 9 for a year, but she's not 9. 9 soon, which feels really big.
Oh my God, I know. Even 7.
Yeah, you start to feel those years where you're like, whoa. And then my little one's 3.5, and I'm countdown to being very unwell when she turns 4, because that was my baby, and we just got a puppy, so that's my 3rd. I'm we're done.
Yes, so at least I feel like that probably softens the growth of the kids getting.
The timing was intentional. Yeah, the timing was definitely intentional to help me over the next year while she transitions to that, because she's in part-time school now, so she gets she's half day. She gets picked up at noon, and so I still feel like I'm hanging on to my little baby, and then pre-K is till 3 or whatever. So that's it.
Yeah. And it's not far away. It's crazy how quickly it goes. We have a lot to talk about, but I think we can start there because you've talked to me briefly about how their age gap was intentional, which not everyone has the ability to plan that way. But they're 6.5 years.
5 years. 5 years and 3 months. And yeah,
I'm terrible at math.
Yeah, me too. Okay. My husband reminds me all the time.
And yeah, why was it intentional to wait that long for you?
I knew I always wanted to be a mom, but I really struggled with this idea of a mom first kind of mom, meaning putting my kids above my needs and everything so focused on them. And the idea of, and yes, for some moms, that is their calling. And they feel incredible with being a mom first kind of mom. For me, I was having panic attacks about it. And so when my husband and I talked about having kids, I was like, how about we not have a house full of littles all at the same time? And I really feel when when we have one and then they get to, pre-K or kindergarten, then I feel like I can just focus on that child and then we can talk about a second. And we even said that if a second didn't happen, we would be okay with it. So I do want to say, I had my first at 36. I had my second at 41. I didn't have an intervention fertility-wise for either, and we got lucky. But I knew that that was a privilege. And we talked about that if we did need to go IVF route and the funds that would take, would we do that? And so I always want to say, it is kind of a privilege to wait later, and it might have a bigger bill attached to it if that's something that you can work with. And if you can't, that's part of the conversation. And it's not out there very much. And he felt kind of the same way. I felt like we couldn't do a double stroller. I couldn't do double diapers. My husband's an entrepreneur. I'm an entrepreneur. We work a lot at night. We are deeply passionate about travel and music and going to festivals and just really living, can I say the S word? Living the shit out of our lives. And I felt like I could do that with one kid in tow. And I knew a lot would change when a second came into the picture. And it did. We were really unsure for a really long time. And then the pandemic happened. And the joke in my house is that 3 Coachellas were canceled until I was like, okay, fine, I'll have a second. And then
it's like the universe being like, it's time.
It's time. Like the world is shut down for a year. Have a second child. We moved upstate for that time. We found our upstate home, renovated it. And that year I just had a baby and a renovation in a house. And that was it. Those were my, major accomplishments.
Those are huge.
They were huge. Looking back, I'm like, yeah, that took up that much space and time to do that. So now, yeah, they're 5 years apart. And it's been interesting seeing as they're now, like, our oldest is getting a little older. There's some jokes, like, I feel like I'll always have kind of a kid in the house. Like, once one graduates and one goes to college and the other one might move back. And now we have, our oldest is going to go to a couple weeks of camp, but we still have a baby in tow, And so it's interesting, but it was definitely our intentional choice. And I can't imagine any other way. It was for us, but it's not for everyone. But I do like to share that, like, that could be a choice. Like, you don't have to have them back to back or closer together just for sibling sake. And I get a lot of people do. You want them to play together. And yeah, there's times that they play together great and times that older sister is like annoyed that the little one's taking all her stuff. But it's going to happen at any age. So
right. I was just going to ask, like, how you feel it's contributed to their relationship and if you felt like it was, obviously you don't have anything else really to compare it to, but in terms of them and their dynamics.
Yeah. One thing I think is really sweet is my oldest feels old enough. Like, if you think back in your own memories, I remember being 8, I remember being 7, I remember that. And she and I will look at our little one, Dover, the 3-year-old, and in these little, like, hysterically funny moments, and we look at each other and we're like, we're going to remember this. So I feel like she gets to remember a lot of the little stuff that they wouldn't otherwise if they were closer in age. And that feels really sweet. Like, I kind of have a buddy in the remembering of how funny she is and the ridiculous things she says, which feels very sweet. I do think my older daughter's relationships are slightly more important. Like, she really needs friends that she's very close with. Like, her friends are very, very, very important to her. And every weekend we, like, make sure she has some one-on-one time with them, because she gets overwhelmed at home with the 3-year-old, with Dover taking her stuff and going through it. Like, and we live in a 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn, and it's nice and it's spacious, but I feel for Navy.
So my sisters and I, Robyn happens to know my older sister well.
I do, from college. We went to Syracuse together and Coachella music festivals together.
But we're each 4 years apart, so I'm the middle. So they're 8 years apart, and my older sister had 9-year-old twins when she had her third, and so they're 8 years apart. And I got pregnant with Nell when Tess was 16 months, so they're very close together. And I will say that I had such incredible relationships with the two of them, and still do. They did with each other, and I see how sweet it is for my sister's twins with the younger. But I will say, when I got pregnant by surprise with Nell, that the first thing I thought was I didn't have enough time with Tess.
Right. Yeah.
And I, like, went through that. I mean, I even actually, like, read, which I don't recommend doing, on Reddit, that someone's like, Jenny just started to like Nell. And it made me so upset.
Oh my gosh.
Like, obviously that's so far from the truth. But I focused a lot in the beginning on this sort of, like, surprise. Right. It wasn't in my plan. I had done IVF thing, but my point being, I respect I want to do it when I feel like I can give it what I want to give it.
And I have more bandwidth and more space and more energy. And
yeah, and I think that, there's incredible aspects to both. I think my older sister, too, had her third when she felt she had the bandwidth after twins and when she could convince her husband that it was time again. But I'm just saying, like, even me, when we, got pregnant, Matt, I was like, oh, Matt, you thought we were only having one, with his reaction too. I think, like, there's just so many elements to planning and not planning, and that ultimately they all share such a wonderful relationship, as we do with our siblings too. And that it's just different, Obviously, I think Navy and Dover, it's different than Tess and Nell. Like, Tess and Nell will probably overlap with friends and interests, which they do now. But yeah,
there's all different ways.
We're in the trenches a lot with, like, both of them having emotions that kind of are on the same level of importance. Right. And,
it's hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just like to highlight, like, you do you, and do what works for you. And also really share for parents or partners of a single child, household, and that being a choice, and that being an incredible choice, because we had that for a really long time. And my husband and I have said, like, we'd be okay. Like if we had, and it's, I love the language of shifting from only child to single child, because I think that feels like,
oh my God,
more
I love that too.
Full and fulfilled and really beautiful. And I just want to echo, like, it's also a really incredible choice. And like,
absolutely. You do you. Yeah. And like not asking people, do you only have one or is it just one?
Mm-hmm.
Things like that. Yeah. Totally. I think it is a privilege to be able to plan. It's a privilege to have as many as you want. And I think there's so many people who write into me, you know, I'm struggling with having my second and I'm worried about the relationship, and I'm writing to you because I see how close your girls are. And I think there's something beautiful about that, but also about having the wider age gap too. Like, how do you feel that it relates to health when you kind of prioritize yourself?
So I will say one thing that I am naturally strong in is putting myself first and saying, like, what do I need? What would feel most supportive for me in that day, and making sure that I carve that out in the day. I very rarely put myself lower on the list unless it's an exception time, like there's a big event happening or a big, kids, trip with the kids coming up, something like that. I look at my day and I say, where am I taking care of me? And then I know when I feel like I've got my feet under me, like I feel grounded, like I feel like me, I can be the best me for them. And I'm sharing that because I'm an example of someone who's doing that almost every single day, not as an exception. Like, oh, mom got mom time, or mom went to yoga on a Sunday. Like, no, that's life most days. And some days that means I might have less time with one of my kiddos, but the time they get with me, they get the best of me instead of the rest of me. And I will say that was easier when I had one, and it was easier when my little one was a baby. I found when she turned 3, I thought when my oldest turned 3, things got a lot more spacious for me, and I had even more time for myself and my work and my passions. When my little one turned 3 and then my older one was at the time 8, everything got harder. And it's funny because I found myself at this new place where I needed to downshift my work and do less and focus more on what I wanted to focus on, because I didn't have as much bandwidth as I used to. And so I actually end up in my coaching practice. I closed a lot of my programs. So rather than give up, for example, in a day, rather than give up getting to yoga class, give up going for a walk, connecting with a friend, I had all these hours that I was working, and I was running 3 live coaching programs at the time. One was a mastermind, a mentorship, and then a meditation program. And I loved them all. And also my Hot Mama group I was running at the time also. Like, it was just all these different programs coming in and out. And I could have kept doing that, it would have been at the sacrifice of a few of those things, like I said, like cooking my food, like being in the kitchen, things that I actually genuinely really love, and whatever it is that you love, So I talked with my husband and where we were at financially speaking and what was possible. And I closed all of my live ongoing programs. Most of those are currently now in Evergreen and available, to get at any time, but there isn't a live component. And I freed up time in my day to do those things that I need to put me first, so I can be me and feel like me as a mom, and not this mom I'm like pushing myself to be, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think, and I love all of that. And I think it helps for you to remember it too. Like, we just bumped into each other and you were saying that you're finding yourself struggling staying present. Do you feel like it's because you're not finding enough time to do those things, or you feel like you should be doing the work stuff, or is there an overlap between the work stuff is you stuff?
I think it's because I'm so used to pushing. And I'm so used to it's like, have you ever heard the phrase, you want something done, give it to a busy person?
Yeah.
I'm so used to up to here and getting it done and then going on to the next thing. And I could juggle all these plates all the time. And then what happened was, like I said, my little one turned 3. I was in that space between 44 and 45. And so perimenopause started coming on. And the things that I used to be able to do and push through before, I could no longer push through. And so I looked at my work and I was like, okay, what could the next chapter for my work look like for me if I wasn't just doing the same old business as usual? And that's my big phrase for the year ahead is like, it's not business as usual in a really positive way. And I would say, my clients, like, if you look at your life, like, if you could design it really in any way, like, what would that look like? And we don't spend a lot of time thinking about that because a lot of us are stuck in a cycle, whether that's by need and necessity or just out of habit. And I really feel like everything happening in the world right now is creating a cataclysmic moment for us to evaluate and like make real big shifts and to take a leap and realize that like there's people and places and opportunities catching us in ways that never had before. Things are shifting. Everything else that was just so much busyness I've removed, and how that relates to me having a harder time focusing is like it's funny, like I have more space, so it's almost harder for me to be present.
Do you feel like you're distracted by like doubt?
Well, first, I think that the biggest thing you just said is that this is different. And I've only been here since, I guess, September is when I feel like this shift came into application in my life. So it's new. So I don't know what.
And sometimes when like we look back to a year ago and it feels so different from then, we're like, wait, at least for me, I'll like look back, something will come up on my phone and I'll be like, oh my God, I felt so much busier last year at this time, or I felt so much less. But, that also is sort of like reminders of the change too.
Yeah. I think one big thing, and you're so probably, so much to say about this, but I think one thing that I struggle with in the presence is so many not good moments. So let's say I'm like more available. So like I'm here for my kids and they're fighting or not listening or just making messes and not respecting themselves, me, the home. And so, okay, I'm here, but like, I'd rather be working, do you know what I mean? Like, I'd rather be launching a program than so these things that I made more space for, and not all the time, of course, little things recently were beautiful. Like I volunteered at my daughter's school so I could be there for the day for something I wouldn't have been before, and I had space for that. And my little one just started gymnastics, so I was like, okay, I could be there at 3 on a Wednesday. Before I could never do that stuff. Judging how I'm valuable or what I've produced in a different way, rather than oh, I hit my numbers, I launched a coaching program, I have 50 people in it. It's like, no, I got to gymnastics at 3 p.m. on a Wednesday is now my new gold star mom, which is so different for me. And mind you, I have a lot of professional accolades mixed in there as well. But then, like I said, let's say, I don't need to get any work done on a Sunday and I'm just with them, but it sucks. And I'm not having a good time. And I don't know how to make it better.
I'm reminded of something I said over the weekend that I'm just so upset that I said. I don't even know if they heard it, but maybe it'll help you give yourself grace. And I'm even giving myself grace as I'm reflecting on it. I took my
I can feel it. I can feel your mom moments.
Oh my
God. They're so hard.
I know. But so anyway, I took them to Meet the Breeds, which if anyone really knows.
Oh, I heard that was kind of a disaster. I have some friends that went there we will never go again.
And I'm not a dog person. And so it's hard to bring your kids to something that you want to be enthusiastic about. But
it's like me with slime or any of those musicians.
Right.
I'm
which those things I'm all about.
Oh,
but
God.
Anyway, this was hard for me. And when we left, they were so, hyper wired. Matt went to get the car. And as we were walking and crossing the street, they wanted to run. And I held them, and my older started running and twisting. He's like, ow, you're twisting my arm. And it was just a disaster. And I, under my breath, said something like, I'd rather be at work. And I apologized later. I don't think they heard, but I apologized for the whole thing. You said that your arm twisted. I'm sorry I had to grab you.
Yeah. It didn't go well.
It just didn't go well. But just I more feel upset about feeling that. You know what I mean? I don't think,
that's what I'm struggling with. It's so much of what I'm struggling with.
Inevitably, there's going to be more of that when you're around more. And I think
that's so true. I just want to pause on right. Downshifting, caretakers, pausing caretakers, there's going to be more. And there's not that many people talking about what you do with those feelings. And just to highlight, I'm not sure what happened with your daughters, but you mentioned that you apologized. I had last night a really tough moment with my oldest, Navy, and it wasn't necessarily an apology because I didn't say it was more what I said to her was earlier tonight. I don't feel good about how that went. So it doesn't always have to be. I want to empower people. You don't always have to have the words, or it's an apology, or I feel like a lot of that could feel right, or it can feel just so much mental chatter. But what I said to her was I don't feel good about how that went. That didn't feel good in my body, and so I'm sorry for
I love that.
situation and like I'd love to move. If there's anything you want to say or ask me, I'm listening. And like if we can both move on, it was not a great moment for me. And it seemed like not a great one for you. And like it can be open-ended. It doesn't have to have an answer or a lesson or a promise.
I always say, like, it doesn't need to be tied up with a bow.
Right.
It can just be something like you said, that didn't feel right. And I think similarly, I could have probably said that, you know, they didn't necessarily hear me, but I think they felt the energy, or maybe I was sighing or like, uhing or whatever. I didn't necessarily need to apologize for that. Those feelings were real. It was more like I didn't like how that whole thing went down. I think when I run out of, you know, it feels like I'm at the end of the rope, I'll sometimes say, what can we do? You know, I've asked you to put on your shoes. And it doesn't seem like you want to. And I know that people are like, that sounds like easier said than done. You're rushing, you're this, or that. Of course, there's times where I might be like, I'm going to put on your shoes for you. And, you know, I'll bring a pair if this isn't what you want to wear, but we have to get out the door, whatever it is. But usually if you're able to kind of like diffuse the agita that's built up, it can help you to connect in a way that you might not. It's not a tool. It's just like, we're stuck here type of thing. Yeah. And I don't like to give scripts because I think it can feel inauthentic if someone's like, I want to remember what Jenny said. But sometimes I'll literally sit down and be like, I'm having such a hard time. You don't want to put on your shoes and we have to leave. Yeah. What can we do?
What can we do? It's so hard.
And like empowering them to feel like part of the equation. I think especially at 3.5, so much for them feels like not a we.
Yeah.
That could help a lot at that age.
She's actually, I got thrown like a tiny bone with a second. Like she'll actually clean up after herself. Sometimes she's a appropriate, you know, resistance in a 3-year-old, but in general, she's got like she'll get frustrated and then she'll go, okay, you know, my 8-year-old does not have that ever, not for anything. And I'm just like, deep breaths. So one thing, like if we've gotten her to do the homework and then I come back and it's all over the table. And I'm like, okay, what comes next after that? Like, part of me just gets so frustrated because I'm like, you need to
should be put away.
Put away. You have to fill out your cover sheet. You have to put it away. All the little cuttings or whatever you may need to go in the trash. Like, please don't
even want to know what that is.
Oh no, and supposedly I've heard from a lot of people like she's in 3rd grade, and 3rd grade is where like so much gets kicked up. It's really where they learn themselves in relation to friends, exactly where like I don't know a better way to say this, but just like the attitude, just the like, you know, and I try and remind myself like she's working out with me at home, so many things and dynamics that she can't work out with her friends or teachers at school because it's harder. It's not as easy for her to keep up as it used to be. Like this is where there's like real thinking, real equations, you know, they've got to really focus and it's a lot.
Yeah,
and I think it's a lot. And so where she can push back, of course we know this, they're safe with us at night. And so I do think like there's a lot of directing that happens from me in the kitchen because I'm tidying, I'm doing other things. So pausing that, going over to the table, sit down and say like,
what comes next?
What comes next? Where are we at?
Yeah.
You know, and again, not always feasible, but just like more of this, like I'm trying to mark myself a little bit with the command, like just sending the commands across the room.
It feels
because as a child, that's even if it's all stuff you're supposed to do, like I can imagine that feels swelling and building when you've been told all day long stuff you're supposed to do.
100%.
And I get that.
Yeah. And I think that's where I'm at with Tess and why she just even this morning was like, can you stop? She basically saying, stop telling me demands. And also I think when we say demands to a kid that is older like that, it feels like we're doubting that they would do it anyway. And you want to be like, well, I know you won't if I don't do it, but that obviously is condescending and they want to be given the opportunity. So are there ways to give reminders without telling them what to do? And it doesn't need to be longer. Like it could be something like, I see you finish your homework. What comes next?
What comes next, yeah. Yeah. And letting them fill in the blank. Yeah, she knows. I have a dear friend I did a session with, and it came up about how she said, I forgot what it was instead, but it was like less managing of the kids and more just being with the kids. And I think that's like every
it is. When you said that you're sometimes like, and this isn't blame.
Yeah, no, it's like we're all the managing.
Sometimes she's probably like leaving it that way to be able to have you like come
ding,
right?
ding. Yeah.
So many people will say to me, you know, when they're super young, they're throwing their food they're not touching it. And I always, because I know when I was there, when you go from having to feed your kid to them, even at a very young age, feeding themselves, you're like, okay, I'm going to do the dishes.
Oh, I'm free. Thank God.
And they're like, I'm in the high chair alone. I'm going to throw this against the wall.
Right.
And how different that can feel when you're sitting with them, even eating your own food with them.
It's not that different when they're almost 9, probably.
Yeah.
Okay.
So try it. But of course, it's easier said than done.
And then I struggle too because I'm like, okay, well then she needs more real connection time with me. But then of course there's so much busyness post-school, post-activity that when we're in bed at night and like now you're talking to me, it's 9 o'clock at night, you're going to be tired. Like we could do this at the dinner table, it's like.
I know that's the hardest for me too.
Like go to bed.
Because you don't want to forego this open forum.
Yeah, this connection time.
Yeah. That they're finally like, opening up to you.
Collaborate with her a little bit more of like, how you love talking to me at night if we have like chat time? Like, can we find another spot for that, before we're in bed and you can come in mommy's bed or something after you brush your teeth and then before bedtime routine. And I would love to do that with her. But again, you're the sink. You're trying to catch up. The house is a mess.
Right.
And the busyness of it all. You're managing 3-year-old that never wants to go to sleep.
But I will say that when I've involved Tess in some of those battles and problem solving, not in the heat of the moment, it's helped a lot. Like she'll even say, using that as an example, if I were to say that, when else can we do that? She might even say, well, there's not another time because she might call me out on that. Right. But then that helps us with self-growth too, right? Maybe I'll do all the cleanup once you've gone to bed, which I know then it's like less me time. But, just figuring out this kind of balance between it all.
And then also like as everything you're saying that I'm sharing, like I like to think of it as like, okay, we'll go into an experimental period. Like, okay, so maybe I get less cleaning done or less management during that homework time, during that post-homework time, during that bedtime. Let's see what happens. Does it take away from me time? Is it actually not that big of a deal? Is it actually just take me 10 minutes after lights out? Like just see, like let yourself experiment and then say, actually, no, I'm really resentful of that. And I don't like that. So I do need to do it, but can I time block it a little? Can I time block myself and say, okay, I'm going to do 20 minutes and then 20 minutes with her?
Absolutely. I think I am experimenting all the time because I haven't figured out the perfect thing.
Totally. Yeah. And really giving ourselves permission to do that, instead of like it being a failure or I wish I did that differently. It's like, okay, now I'm going to try this week and see what happens.
Yes. And similarly, like, have you ever tried to skip a Coachella?
I only skipped one because Navy was born February 20th and then Coachella was April. So that was the only one I missed since we started going, basically. I've been to, I forget, I think this will be my 12th or 13th. So if people don't know, Coachella is a music festival in Indio, like near Palm Springs, California. That's every year. My husband and I have been going forever. So
yeah, and the reason I'm bringing it up is because we spoke briefly about it before this, but just what are those things that maybe might typically feel like they're at odds with being a mom.
Totally.
Or there might be judgments or noise or things like that. Not that I have any of that in relation to Coachella and vice versa, but I think we both feel that around certain things. And what empowers you to know with conviction that absolutely not, this is good for me no matter how old I am.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'd love to hear.
Yeah, so we do Coachella, we go to Ibiza in the summer, we go to fish festivals. I'm leaving for a fish festival in Mexico. And I get that like these are big things to pull off. In my Hot Mama coaching program, I call them putting fun on the calendar. These are the big F ones, like the capital F. There's like little Fs that are easier to do. You can have one of those a month, one of those a week, but the big Fs are like big planning, a lot of, just a lot to make it happen. And I will say, I do have a supportive partner. He loves these things, but a lot of years he's resisted. He's like, this is just too hard. It's not worth it. It feels like it's not worth it to me. Then when we get there, it's always worth it.
How do you get?
But I really am.
Adamant.
I'm trying to think of like
what tool can you give us for my homebody husband?
I had to send an email one year about why it was so important to me. And in that email, I will say that I'd been focusing a lot on why it was important to me. But in that email, I shared about why I felt it was really important to us. and the connection that we have at these things that just doesn't happen anywhere else. We're not big like out to dinner people. Like we go a few times a year with friends, something like that. Like we are all or nothing type, like we go in deep or we're just kind of home. And recharging when we're home. So I share that like this is really important to the fabric of who we are and how we keep growing and like what we connect on. Because for example, we go to Coachella, we are both music freaks. We love music. That's all I did in my 20s was go see live music. And those like artists that we discover on the polo fields, like we listen to that all year. We have all these stories. And I don't know what it is. There's just something so fiery inside of me of like, this is who I am and this is what I need. I have to honor that or I feel like I'll die. Like it feels like that dramatic. But for me, it's like these are the things that make me feel like me and these are the things that allow me to show up for this big life that we're living and the way that I parent and just the essence of who I am. And so I fight for them that strongly, even when it's like, whoa, like we're in the trenches in my marriage. And we've had a lot of moments where we have been, and I do push.
It's less about, checking it off a list and more about like, I need this to survive and feel like I'm holding on to what, sparks me.
Totally. Because it's so hard and it's so in the trenches and it's just so much.
And that's
how I get through it.
Yeah. And there's times that I think I've come close to not doing some of those things. Like a birthday will come up and I'll be like, I don't need to celebrate. But then there's something that's
You're really good at celebrating your birthday, I feel like. On social media, what I know. I'm like,
oh my God, I think
she does it right. Good job.
Thank you.
And I know what it takes to pull that off. Like it's you're exhausted. You don't sleep leading up to it. There's so much planning. You're like, why did I do this to myself? But then you look back in the years and you look at those memories and you collect them like charms of gold. Like that's what you look back on your lifetime and you'd be like, okay, I did that and those things were important to me. But I do also have a partner that like he really does want things to be chiller and do less. And I just say like he chose me for a reason. And so clearly like there's a growth point in there. And I will say I wouldn't push him if I didn't know how much he loved it when we were happy. Like if I had evidence to the contrary where we were somewhere and he was like,
or if we really couldn't make it happen for whatever reason. Like we're not like
if there was
that are going to be like,
by my tongue and illness, something like I really need to be home. Of course, like we are reasonable, sensible adults here. But I do think that there's this idea of like when you have a child, your parents, and you need to become this other thing. And I just call bullshit.
Same. Completely.
Unless that's for you. Unless that is your highest light and love or everything in between.
Where someone else can make that judgment for you.
Totally.
I think we just both feel strongly about the things that, light us up and that we really want to hold on to and that we one day will want our kids to hold on to. I think that's another element of it, down to why am I going to this exercise class? I know it means I'm not going to have as much time with my kids and they'll be like, why are you going? And with conviction being like, I want to do this for me, or why are you going to Ibiza, or why are you, whatever it is. And not that those are like just run-of-the-mill things. It happens to be something that you and I both share. But it might even
be like a weekend in Connecticut. It's just a day at the beach.
Last night, going to Van Leeuwen on a whim
ice
at
cream.
6 p.m.
Totally.
Like why we want our kids to feel strongly about doing things that are adventurous or spontaneous or just make them, feel alive.
Joy.
Yeah.
Joy. And I do feel like part of why I do have a natural inclination for this and I've held on to it so strongly is I do feel like part of why I'm here in this lifetime is to share this and to empower others that I'm feeling inspired to put that on the calendar for myself. And maybe it's 2 years from now and that's okay. And maybe you're in a place where in your life where you don't know what's fun for you. That's also okay. I teach that too. Because it's probably not getting, dancing on tables in your 20s, although I still do a different version. It's more like stages, but there's different things that bring us joy and bring us fun and you deserve to have the space to explore that and to at least get that on the calendar at least once a year.
Yeah.
No matter what stage of life that you're in.
And I think it relates to something in parenting that often we get into sort of, I wouldn't say rut, but do we really have to say no? Like sometimes an idea will come to play, like someone will invite us to something that seems like, how are we going to make this happen? We have to move mountains. And I think there's a personality difference. Sometimes Matt will just be like, this feels like really hard and logistics and all this. And I think when similarly, I've used this example. Our kids are like, can we make cupcakes at 6 p.m. on like a Monday? Yeah, sometimes you can say no to the whim trip to a concert or the cupcakes at 6, but do you really have to? Or do you really want to? I think you get into this sort of like habit of saying no to things because it just doesn't fit. And I think similarly, when you become a mom or you're a certain age, you're like, I should be saying no. But it's like, there's no should. Do you want to say no?
Right. Pause. And that's where the intuition piece comes in. And that's really just like honoring yourself and also this season of life. Like if you have a newborn, probably is a great time to say no and to enjoy that. And I really just believe like be in the moment that you're in and trust that will come later too.
And differs for everybody. It
exactly.
Doesn't have to look what we're talking about at all.
But I will say, when I'm at Coachella, I don't meet many other moms with multiple kids, Once in a while I'll meet one with one. And yes, there's definitely moms there, but like in an average day, I don't meet many.
Right.
Because it's really hard to pull off. For us, for years, we did have our nanny, on full time watching them. And we would bring in a parent or, a grandparent or multiple grandparents and booking extra activities and really, and as you mentioned with, going to workout class, like when I am going to work out, I always tell my kids what I'm doing. I never just say I'm leaving now or I'm doing this. It's like, well, I'm going to this. This is important to me. This is going to yoga. And so that they hear these practices at home or even if I've lost it, let's say I blew my top and I yelled and I was not my greatest self. I say, I'm going for a walk. I need to take some space for myself. Yes. I don't like how I'm acting and I need to remove myself from this situation.
And not to feel like that's a mean thing. Wouldn't we want our kids to do that?
No, it's like the nicest thing I could possibly do for my family.
I completely agree. Are there moments that you and your husband, disagree on something in the more, not mundane, but day to day?
The everyday, not the parenting stuff. Yeah, I do think, I will say this. I'm very lucky in the sense that I got really into what we mentioned before, Rye method of parenting, which I just felt like a lot of the philosophies in it, using commentary and talking kids through things, less stuff, just really honoring them and where they're at. When I found that and I explained it to him, it made a lot of sense to me and it made a lot of sense to him. And it felt like, okay, I get this and we were on the same page with it. So I will say with a lot of the parenting stuff, he really has trusted me and he knows I'm researching and reading. And the truth is he knows he's not. And he trusts me and trusts my instincts and like I'm really kind of loud with that stuff. Where we do struggle a bit more now, for example, is I will have moments of frustration with him that I will direct at him. And then our almost 9-year-old picks up on that and she'll repeat a lot of those things. And then he's like, you got to shut that down. And I'm like, I hear you. I agree with you. That's what 8, 9-year-olds do is they want to be like their mom. Like she uses the exact phrases I use. She talks about things in the exact way with the exact inflection. And so if I'm annoyed at him, and let's say he's making jokes that it's not the right time to make jokes and I'm frustrated. I'll say, please, like this is not funny. It's not right now. She'll later say, Dad, you're so not funny and not right now. And he's like, you got to shut that down. I'm like, I've had talks with her. So that's something I'm bringing like now into this conversation that like I have not successfully navigated yet. And I'm trying. And I've chatted with her about how there's adult moments. And, I could say less of those things too. But like I said, we are in a 2-bedroom apartment. There is nowhere for us to go. We live in 3 rooms.
And I'm thinking about how—
And I'm human.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like first, let's just say that that's really hard to change and just like, not react when our spouse might be saying or doing something that in the moment we can't just let go by. And also if it's something that we especially don't want our kids to think is okay, I don't know what it was, and I think 2 things. One, sometimes I might give a look or something instead. And then we'll talk about it.
We need
later.
like a code for a look.
Yes, because
I give a lot of
I'll
looks,
do those looks.
A special one.
Sometimes I'll be like, which is not okay. And Matt will be like, what? And I'll be like, I specifically am not saying it out loud.
I don't want to say it.
We don't want to talk about it now.
I'm trying not to. Yeah.
And then 2 is that we have to think about, I don't know if you need to picture if it were sons or with daughters, but just how it would feel if they repeated something that daddy has said to us. That would kill me. I actually, they don't do that toward me, but they do that toward him. And it means that I probably need to like pull back a little bit on like all
Same
the
in my house.
correcting.
The girls with the moms, and like I have girly girls and they're all over me and my stuff. And they love daddy, but it's different. It's so different in my house.
Right. And maybe it's not just because of what we're saying. And you're right. Maybe there's this like natural inclination to just, not push daddy away, but you know what I mean?
Side with mommy. Let's just say it. Side with mommy.
Yes.
Mommy's frustrated with daddy right now. I don't like what he's saying either. I don't think it's funny.
Right.
Because it's not funny.
When daddy's frustrated with mommy, it's probably just like, daddy, stop. Be nice.
Yeah. Poor daddy.
I know. But just knowing that, like, you don't want to add to that. But I also think, like you said, talking to her, not heat of the moment to me always feels so much better. And if we can bite our tongue, sometimes I can. And it's why I'll be like, give a look or something. I think it always serves better for everybody, and not to let it blow over, but then to talk about, how you both would want it to have gone.
Right. I think I need to have, as you're saying, like a not of the heat of the moment conversation with my daughter. I need to have a not heat of the moment conversation with my husband. Like this is coming up. It's creating these rub moments.
First and foremost.
It's like leading to things that you don't like that I actually don't like. I totally get why you don't like that. I wouldn't like that either.
Before we go, you and I could clearly talk for hours. I want to know something that you can give to me and any listeners about sort of gut intuition. Is that what you called it? Is there any like tangible tool, since I so firmly believe in going with my gut? How can I like trust my gut right now? Is there something I need to do to make sure that it's more clear?
What a beautiful question. So the first thing coming to mind is trying your hardest to carve out some space in the day where you have space to listen to yourself. And so I do think we are busy, we are on the go, but we are also commuting, or we have a pocket of time at home. Can you just sit down for a minute and take 3 slow, deep breaths? Don't even call it a meditation. Like literally just like breathing in and out, in and out, and doing that 3 times, and just a little space. And you can ask yourself, is there anything I need to know? Is there anything I need to see? Or something you're working through or struggling with, or, higher self, whatever it is that wants to come through. Like, can you support me in this moment? And see what that feels like. Like for me, I really do feel it in my belly. But some people feel it more in their heart, in their sacral area, in their mind. So really carving out a tiny moment of space. Maybe you're used to listening to music or putting on a podcast. Like, can you be quiet actually in those moments? Put your podcast on, but then 5 minutes before you get home, just let it be quiet. Like none of us just sit in silence. So doing something like that. And then I really recommend using your intuition for everything. So what that looks like is we tend to put our intuition on the special shelf. Like, oh, when I have a big life decision or a big moment, like, should I do this? Shouldn't I? But can you use it every day? Like, what am I eating for lunch today? So really like asking yourself, what would feel good? What do I want to make for dinner later in this week? Well, it's going to be really cold or rainy. So like a soup would sound good. Like that's actually your intuition.
Yeah.
And so more of those like using it day to day when you are getting dressed, in moments with your kiddos, like hey self, like how can I handle this situation in this moment? Like, what do I need to see? And when you start to hear those messages, the more you listen to them, the more you're going to get them. So it becomes a cycle of like making space, asking, listening, honoring, and then remembering to like have fun with it, like play with it. Like literally it's like, what do I want for lunch today? What do I want? Like these little tiny things. What's my workout? What big fun, I'm going to put on the calendar this year? And recognizing that intuition generally has a softness. It feels like a pull from within. I get that question a lot of like, how do I know if it's not anxiety or a should? And to me, anxiety and fears and shoulds feel more like, it doesn't feel like this gentle tug from inside.
Yeah.
This like knowing, this deeper knowing. And for some people, it may never feel super clear and you might grow into it.
Right.
And sometimes it's like a whisper, it takes time. And also knowing that like if you had children, like there's going to be a different feeling there too. Like actually, like if you physically carried your child in pregnancy, like your organs are moved around. So like your intuitive voice might be like literally a different place and take a minute to come back. And, in all these seasons and chapters in our lives, it can look and feel different. But can you just commit to that, like I said, that space, that time honoring? And of course, there's things that help more, doing more meditation, mindful movement, mindful moments. Really, it's just a moment for me is what I think of it. And sometimes what that looks like for me, I live in an apartment building, before I go in the door is I just like slump down in the hallway on the ground
like
and just take up 1 minute.
Place.
Yeah, just 1 minute.
Sometimes I'll get caught and someone will open the door and be like, how long have you been there?
Totally.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's like I'm gathering my strength for the night, but take that also as a moment for your intuition. Like, what do I really need tonight?
Yes.
And sometimes it's a night like last night, I needed Netflix. But it was intentional and it was intuitive.
You gave yourself space to know what that
exactly.
was.
And sometimes it's like, nope, I need to go to bed earlier. You know what? I just need tonight. Like sometimes a Thursday night, I'll let it just be a free night. Like I will stay up too late. I will scroll too late.
Oh, right.
I will be on the phone. And like that feels good.
Right.
But
just
it's
being able to like make
in.
that plan and check in.
Yeah, check in. So that's all intuition.
Thank you so much. I love that. I think so many people listening will love that and prioritize that. How can people find you to get more nuggets of gold like that?
So my business and my blog is all on yourhealthiestyou.com. So really easy to remember. And then my speaking, my meditations, everything like that is on my personal site. And that's robynyoukilis.com. But my name is a little hard to spell. So my first book, which is easy to remember, as you said many times, is called Go With Your Gut. So if you check that out on Amazon, you'll grab my name, everything. And I hang out on Instagram a lot. So if you hear this and you follow me, say hi in the DMs. I love connecting with
we'll
people.
Be thrilled to see all the amazing things at Coachella.
Coachella, Fish. We don't know where we're going yet this summer, but all the things. And yeah, just really trying to make the most of this precious life.
Inspiring. Thank you so much for being on with us today, inspiring us all, and for helping me to continuously go with my gut. Thank you all for listening today on We Didn't Turn Out Okay.